Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the WOW History Channel. This week, I'm bringing you a very interesting source document. It's a proclamation from 1799 where John Adams, the president at the time, is proclaiming a day of Thanksgiving for the following month. This document was offered recently by Early American History Auctions, and they were kind enough to allow me to use it and to provide an image of it. The document is what we call a broadsheet or a broadside. It's a simple printed one-sided piece of paper that would have been folded up into a letter form. They didn't really have envelopes back then. They just folded the paper up into a letter-sized piece, sealed it with red wax, and then they would send it out to various newspapers so that they would publish it and the people get the information. You have to remember there was no internet, no emails, no telephone, not even a postal system at the time as we know it today. So this was really the only way that they could get information out to the people. What's really interesting about this document, what really wowed me, was the fact that it contains so much religious language. Today we think of religion not very much, actually. We have the First Amendment that guarantees freedom of religion, and then we have the separation of church and state. Today we have basically eliminated religion of any form from all the public forums. But we also have reached a point where it's almost freedom from religion instead of freedom of religion. So when you look at this document that is now over 200 years old, you look at it in the lens of today's society, and because of that, when you read this, it is a shocker. You will read this and go, oh my God, I can't believe that this is something that was actually said by the President of the United States, and it just will shock you. So I'm going to put a link to an image below, so if you want to read the entire document, you may, but I'm going to read excerpts from it just to give you a sense of what this document sounds like. And again, it's a very, very religious. It's a very religious document. The document was signed on March 6th, 1799 by John Adams, and he basically proclaimed the day of April 25th of 1799, roughly a month later, as a day of national Thanksgiving. When you read through the document, first of all, the language is not like the language we use today. This document, it is really flowery, really robust, and it gives you an indication of perhaps the education level of the people that were reading it at the time. They would seem to be, based on this, to be highly educated. But this was what went out to the newspapers and the publications of the time. The other thing you notice about it, and again, if you look at the document in the image, you can see where the letter F is used in many cases for the letter S. So in other words, the word state would be in print as FTATE, and fullness, which has two S's at the end, would be FULNEFS. So you have two blockades when you're reading this document. You have the language, and then you have the odd anachronistic use of the F for an S. So the first time you read these sort of documents, it's kind of daunting, but once you get used to it, it's very easy to run through it. The document is essentially cut into three parts. The first part is the reason for the proclamation. The second part is the proclamation itself. And then finally, you have the results that hopefully will occur because of this day of Thanksgiving. The document is not literally broken up into these sections. I just call them this so that you can have a sense of the language in each section and why he's using it. What I'll do is I'll read from each of the different sections so that you can get a sense of what the document is all about. So these are just excerpts, not the entire document. And I encourage you to read the entire document because it really is a fascinating piece of history. So here we go. One of the reasons for this proclamation, John Adams writes, men who are made capable of social acts and relations, who owe their improvements to the social state, and who derive their enjoyments from it, should, as a society, make their acknowledgments of dependence and obligation to Him, with a capital H, who hath endued them with these capacities. So, I mean, this is pretty. It'll put you to sleep. You have to stick with it. But basically, saying that we got to give appreciation to God. The capital H-I-M is God. He goes on to say, he who is able to defend or to destroy the most precious interests of the people of the United States are still held in jeopardy by the hostile designs and insidious acts of a foreign nation. And there, Adams is referring to the intrigues of foreign nations. America was still very young at the time, and they were feeling their way around the world, and there were actors who were coming into America that didn't have America's best interests at heart. So this is one of the reasons for the proclamation. He also said that the observance of special seasons for public religious solemnities is happily calculated to avert the evils which we ought to deprecate, and to excite to the performance of the duties which we ought to discharge, by affording opportunity to teach and inculcate them, by animating devotion and giving to it the character of a national act. In other words, these supplications to God are designed to avert evil, to teach faith, and to give it a national character. Sure, we're not going to make whatever religion he's got here, which is probably Christianity, the state religion, but that doesn't mean that the state can't promote faith and promote religion. There is no mention in here about Christianity or any particular religion. It mostly refers to God as a higher power. Because of these reasons, John Adams makes this proclamation. For these reasons, I have thought proper to recommend, and I do hereby recommend accordingly, that Thursday, the 25th day of April next, be observed throughout the United States of America as a day of solemn humiliation, fasting, and prayer, that the citizens on that day, abstaining as far as may be from their secular occupations, devote the time to the sacred duties of religion in public and in private. So this is the proclamation. What does he hope to accomplish by this proclamation? What's going to happen on this day of Thanksgiving? That he would save our cities and towns from a repetition of those awful pestilential visitations under which they have lately suffered so severely. Now, what's he talking about there? And this is something that's going to be a whole nother subject for another episode. America during the 1797, 98, 99 was going through these yellow fever epidemics, primarily in Philadelphia and New York, and it was a plague. I mean, it's almost like the COVID-19 pandemic we're going through right now, except that it was worse because they had no clue as to what was causing it, no clue as to how to treat it, and no clue how to cure it. So the citizens, just like they are today in New York City, they're leaving the city to go out into the suburbs and the countryside to get away from this disease. They didn't know that the yellow fever was caused by mosquito bites or transmitted by mosquitoes. But they left the city to get away from it. Of course, the poor people couldn't leave, and many of them died in the cities. So this is what he's referring to as this pestilential visitation that's coming on America. He goes on further to state that he would prosper our commerce, manufactures, and fisheries, and give success to the people in all their lawful industry and enterprise. That he would smile on our colleges, academies, schools, and seminaries of learning, and make them nurturers of sound science, morals, and religion. That he would bless all magistrates from the highest to the lowest, give them the true spirit of their station, make them a terror to evildoers, and a praise to them that do well. He goes on with a couple more results, and then he starts here. That he, with a capital H, would put an end to the effusion of human blood and the accumulation of human misery among the contending nations of the earth, by disposing them to justice, to equity, to benevolence, and to peace. So in other words, he's talking about these nations that are fighting against each other. He's hoping that all that stuff would stop. And finally, he says, and that he would extend, he, capital H, would extend the blessings of knowledge, of true liberty, and of pure and undefiled religion throughout the world. And he signs it at the bottom. There's a little circle with the letters LS in it. The LS stands for legal seal, which is gives the effect of his printed signature the same as an actual signature. And that's also signed at the bottom in print by Thomas Pickering. And when you look at the back of this document, it is actually franked or posted by Thomas Pickering. This is an actual broadside that was sent out to a newspaper. We don't know we don't know which it was, but this and many others were sent out to newspapers. So I hope you get a sense of the language that was used in a lot of these documents in the early life of our country. They were flowery, they were prone to religious sentiments, and they were completely unlike the stuff that we would hear today. There were numerous proclamations for Thanksgiving. This one clearly was not the same Thanksgiving as you and I know in November, but it was because of the various reasons, the president felt that it was important to make this proclamation. This was the way that the president communicated with the people. Now, again, when you think of Thanksgiving, today we eat a turkey. We stuff ourselves. We stuff the turkey and ourselves, and we have a great meal. A day of Thanksgiving does not necessarily have to be on the third Thursday of November. It can be any day of the year. This document was not done to promote religion. It was done to give some comfort to the public who had been suffering under the yellow fever epidemic. It was to give them some comfort from the wars that continued to rage even after we gained our independence. It was to fight against the intrigues of foreign nations that were trying to disrupt our young country. It was just to reassure the people that they were not alone, that he was with them, he being John Adams, and that there's also a higher power, a guiding hand, if you will, that was watching over everything. Now, why did I think this document was important? Well, a number of reasons. One was to show you how they communicated this information to the public. And two, to show you the level of language and the level of religiosity that was included in documents of the time. You'll be amazed to see how much our country has changed and evolved over the last 200 plus years. And you'll be amazed at how politically incorrect some of these early documents are. I encourage you to seek them out. You can look for them on the internet. The Library of Congress has many items scanned. A lot of the major museums now are digitizing their collections, so it's not so difficult to find these anymore. Yes, we've come a long way, but have we really changed that much? My hope is that these early documents will cause you to reflect upon yourself a little bit and see how your attitudes are toward things like religion and Uncle Tom and the various things that I've talked about in previous episodes. They're all really important, and they can help guide us along the path to whatever the future might bring. My goal is to truly make this a wow history channel by bringing to you items and documents and subjects that you may not have ever encountered before, But when you see them, it may change your life. It may change your attitude toward the world. It may change your attitude toward various subjects. So it really is a teaching tool. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Just hit the subscribe button. And also, please leave a comment. So thank you for listening and for viewing, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you and goodbye.